All right, welcome to the Natural Birth Success Formula. I'm Stephanie Mitchell. This is my sister, Crystal Borgeson, and we are so excited that you're taking the time to invest in having the type of birth that you want. So we'll do a quick intro. So we are sisters, both homeschooling moms to 6 kids. We've been business partners for quite some time now. I've been a doula for about 15 years. And we both have a lot of experience with natural birth. And we were talking several months ago just about, we talk about birthy stuff a lot. And, I always share my doula experiences with Crystal. And we were just
I've
talking.
known you since your doula journey. So
Yes, she's walked with me on that journey. And we've had our own birth journeys of learning about a lot about birth and birth options as we've had our own kids. And we were talking a few months ago just about how there's so many little facets to natural birth. And we're like, gosh, if only like every woman could just know these few things that would just change their mindset just a little bit and help them to be so much more likely to have a natural birth, because it seems like a lot of women that want a natural birth, like they just aren't aware of all these little things. And then they fall into some traps, and they're so simple, such simple things. And so we thought we should just do a course on all these things that we wish we would have known when we went to have our own natural birth, and the things that we wish our friends and other women that we know, the things we wish they knew before they went into it.
yeah,
So that's
we
what
hear the repeated stories, the same, it's like the same couple of stories over and over from
and over.
We're like, well, I wanted to have a natural birth, but A, B, and C happened. And we're like, well, did you do this? And it's like, we noticed one or two things, tweaks that if they had done, they could have increased their likelihood of having the type of birth they wanted. And a lot of women come out feeling so disappointed.
Yeah,
like,
that's the thing, is
one
they
of the
feel
biggest things. So disappointed, and they feel like they couldn't do it, and that they were robbed of an experience. And then everybody's just like, well, I had a healthy baby, and that's all that matters, is I had a healthy baby. I'm like, well, mom matters too. I mean, of course, in the end, if it comes down to having a bad birth or a healthy baby, the healthy baby tops it. But mom's birth experience matters too.
Yes,
Like,
birth matters.
You remember that. I let you know that's a memorable occasion.
It's true. Birth matters. That is so true. Birth matters, and it's an experience that shapes you as a mom. It's an experience that you remember. It's an experience that embeds certain things within your mind, within your heart, and it's important that you feel good about your birth experience no matter how it turns out. So that's what we want to help you with. So really, this class isn't about whether natural birth is better or all the statistics or that kind of stuff. We're not going to try and convince you that natural birth is better or what the benefits of natural birth are. I, as a doula with my clients, I really don't care what kind of birth my clients have. My job is to support them in whatever birth experience they want. And so I'm fully supportive of whatever type of birth a mother wants, even though I do believe there's a lot of benefits to natural birth, but that's not what you're here for. You're here, you already want to have a natural birth, and you're here and you're serious enough about it to take the time to be here and invest your time in figuring out how you can make that happen. So that's what we want to help you with, because natural birth, this is the thing, natural birth doesn't just happen. This is what we hear with so many women we talk to, is like, they just want to kind of give it a try. And especially, so somebody who's having a birth outside the hospital, I feel like they already know, like, okay, it's a different mindset. We're just going to have a natural birth because you don't get an epidural at home, right?
Yeah.
But
it isn't, we're going to give it a try. It's, well, the baby's coming.
Yes.
So I better be prepared, because there are no second plans in there where you can just be like, well, if it's not going well, I'll just hurry and get an epidural.
Yeah, that means a transfer to the hospital, which, you don't plan for in a home birth. That just happens sometimes. Yeah. But I mean, women who birth in the hospital, if you're birthing in the hospital, you can't just say, I'm just going to give it a try and see what happens. This is kind of like if you were like, I'm going to I've really wanted to do a triathlon. It sounds super cool. And so I think I'm just going to give it a try. I think, I hear that there's a triathlon in the summer and I'll just give it a try and see what happens. I mean, maybe I'll do it and maybe I won't. I mean, if you say that, what's the likelihood that you're actually going to complete it? Almost zero, right? You're just not going to. You don't
probably not making it through the first event.
Right. You don't go to a
Which
marathon. Huh?
Which happens in birth. You don't get through any of the stages. You get through one stage and you're like, oh, shoot.
That was hard. And I guess that's not happening. But here's the thing. It's not like you have to train the way you do for a marathon to have a natural birth. You just have to have a few little things that you know. And like Crystal said, there's so many patterns. And so that's what we are going to share with you throughout this class. So
well, and they're pretty much things that you're going to be setting up for yourself anyway. Like they're not out of the way steps. These aren't out of the way steps.
Right. So we've kind of found that there's two paradigms to birth, two kind of differing ideas on the different ends of the spectrums. I mean, I see a lot of people and a lot of like hospital care providers that are like, okay, well, birth must be managed. We follow these protocols. We do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and we do this. And we just manage it. And if this happens, then we do this. And it's kind of thought of as like birth is a scary thing. We have to manage it and we have to have our hands in it all the time and try to control the process, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that, and this is how Crystal was when she was pregnant her first time, is like, well, women have been given birth first since the beginning of time. It's just going to happen. Like, I don't see what the big deal is. Birth is a natural thing. Why would it be that hard? I don't know why you're making such a big deal about it. Birth is just,
why do I even need to prepare for it? It's coming whether or not.
It's just going to happen, right? And the reality is that birth is natural, but it doesn't just happen, right? And we know now that the vast majority of women have a medical birth. So I don't know if this is like, don't quote me on this statistic, because I don't know if it's like, I've looked a lot of places and I couldn't seem to find the same number across the board, but suffice it to say that most women have a medicated birth. Okay. Most women have medicated births. And this is even women who want a natural birth usually end up having a medicated birth. So the Natural Birth Success Formula, this course series, is really designed to lay out the most critical decisions that you make to make sure that a natural birth is the most likely scenario. There's a lot of things that you can do besides just going in and giving it a try. There's a lot of things, there are different things that we see, different decisions from the very beginning of pregnancy that we see that are like, I'm seeing this thing and it's kind of a red flag. So we're going to go through all those things. Yeah. So our class series is 4 classes. Tonight, we are talking about the number 1 birth planning mistake that we see. So this as a doula,
off everything.
This is the granddaddy of them all. Like you're
going to do anything. This is what you got to do.
This is what you got to do if you want a natural birth. And if you get it wrong, your chances of having a natural birth are it's probably not going to happen. So we're going to talk about that today. Next class 2, we're going to be talking about all of your birth class options. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't know. What's the difference between Bradley and Lamaze and hypnobirthing, all these things. So we're going to talk about all of your birth class options. Class 3 is going to be all about natural pain relief. Obviously, we know birth is painful. We're going to talk about the natural things that you can do if you don't want to have an epidural, you don't want IV drugs. We're going to talk about all of your pain relief options.
And there are options. It's not you have to just sit in pain the whole time. Like there are options for helping manage the pain to get through, which I think is also from talking to people. I think a lot of people don't believe that they're like, well, no, I got to go through all the pain or I don't, nothing else is going to help. It's either you get the pain reliever or you don't.
You either get an epidural or you just like, you have to grin and grit your teeth and bear it. Right.
Yeah. And that's not true. There are actually quite a few things.
Right. And class 4 is going to be 10 keys 10 essential keys to a natural birth. So these are just kind of like all the things that are like, oh man, if you have these things in order, you're really just going to make it a lot more likely. And so things that we felt as experienced birthing moms and from my doula experience to say, these are the things
talking to other doulas.
Yeah, these are the things that you should know.
Yeah.
So that's going to be class 4. So obviously we cannot guarantee that good planning is going to equal the exact birth experience that you want, right? Birth is unpredictable. It is. We don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. Weird things happen in birth sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But it's not as unpredictable as you might think. Just like what we said, there's things that we see. So my last doula client that I had, she wanted a natural birth. And I could tell from my very first appointment with her, I was like, I got to teach her some things. I got to help her with some things because she has this idea of having a natural birth, but the decisions that she's making that I can see are already the process going on in her head isn't really going to lead her to that outcome. Therefore, it's a little bit predictable. These are patterns. It's kind of a progression. We can tell the path that a birth is going to go pretty early on before labor, right?
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with your pain tolerance level. That's another thing that like lately I've even been hearing, I have such a high pain tolerance. Can I do it? I am so, or I can't handle any pain whatsoever. Well, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it. It's these choices you're making that'll support you through that or not.
Your choices and your mindset.
Mm-hmm. And yes, it's a mind game. That's for sure. Birth is a mind game more than anything.
It is. It is. So,
but you have to be prepared for it. Just like the marathon.
What the heck? Sorry about that. Okay. So we've already said, we can promise you one thing is that just saying you want a natural birth is not going to just make it happen, right? So it's rare if you're like, well, we'll just see what happens. It all starts with a solid decision. It's like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do what it takes to learn how to control my mindset. And I'm going to learn the things that I need to learn to make it be most likely to happen. And I have to be committed to that decision, even if it's inconvenient, right? It's just a mindset. Like I just have to decide and I have to commit.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to decide like how much do you want,
and then make any of your following decisions in birth based off of the decision you make. If you're going to have a natural birth, then you need to make decisions that are going to support that. Right. You're going to have like a very hospital-minded birth, then you need to make the decisions that are going to be in line with that.
Right. And it's not always going to be fun. Like you'll find out, throughout the classes, one of the things like you need to do is be patient with your body and your baby and allow your body to just do what it needs to do, which might mean that you go past 40 weeks, or it might mean that your labor is a little bit longer. These things you have to just, okay, I made this decision. This is what I want. And if you change what you want later and you're in the middle of labor and you're like, actually, I don't know that I want this. That's a totally different thing. Then, the decision should be yours.
Failure. That's not failure. We want you to own and know your decisions and be able to make these choices. And so no matter which way your birth ends, you were in control of that. You were in the driver's seat and you made the decisions best for you. You weren't feeling forced or pushed into it. Steph's had multiple clients that we've spoken about that went into the hospital and their birth did not go the way they expected. And yet on the other side, they're like, no, I'm pleased with how it went because I was in the driver's seat. I wasn't coerced. I wasn't tricked. I wasn't pushed into any decisions I didn't want to. I was the one who fully made those decisions. And that's where we want this to be, is that you realize that you are in the driver's seat of your birth all the way through. Your decisions are there and you need to respect it so that others will respect that.
Exactly. And in order for that to happen, because we should be able to put our trust in our provider, you need to understand your own options.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as a doula, like I said, I've seen several mistakes women make, but there's one that tops them all. One mistake that is the crux of birth. So if I have a client that wants a natural birth and makes this mistake early on, I can almost guarantee she's headed for failure. This is hands down, like it is the thing. So let's talk about it for a second. So just let's talk about food for a second. You're like, what does food have to do with this? Like, just stick with me for a second. If you are craving like a really awesome lasagna, like a fine Italian food, where are you going to go eat? You're going to go to an Italian place, right?
Yes, a nice Italian restaurant.
A nice Italian place.
You're not going to the drive-through Italian restaurant.
So you're not going to go where you can get this burger, right? You're not going to go to this burger restaurant. I want you to pay attention to how good this burger looks. Like, I don't know whether I would choose the Italian restaurant over this burger because it looks quite amazing.
They both look so good.
Right. It's really not that Italian food is necessarily better than a burger. Neither are bad, but it just really depends on what it is that you want to eat, right? Sometimes you might want a burger, or a person might prefer a burger. Like my husband's always going to prefer a burger over an Italian food. And that's fine, but it depends on what you want to eat. You have to match up what you want with where you're going to eat, right? And if you want this burger, you're not going to go to McDonald's to get it either, right? You know, a type of place where you're going to get something like this. So it's the same with birth. It's not that two women's different ideas of birth are bad. It's just different. So my view of a beautiful birth and what I would want for me is even different from Crystal's, even though we have the same, we have a lot of the same values surrounding birth. But on the same line of thinking, there's women who have their birth would be completely different from like to me would be horrific.
Yeah.
But that's what they want. It's not that her idea is bad or my idea is bad. It's just different, right? And everybody has their own view of birth. So we're all looking for the same destination, right? We're all looking for a healthy baby and a happy mama. That's what we're looking for.
Don't forget the happy mama part.
Yes, but it's a different journey, right? So if you want to see the Nutcracker and you have in your mind, I'm going to see this Nutcracker, and you dress up and you're ready for a fancy night and you get in the car and you're not driving and someone drives you and you find yourself at a football game.
Yes.
You're not going to be very happy.
No, you're not going to be pleased to be sitting outside in 30-degree weather in your fancy gown.
Right. And we know, though, that lots of people would rather be at the football game than the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you may have the same goal of like having a good time, a good evening or whatever, but your journey is different. Right. So you can't have this idea of having like this, a home birth and then choose like a hospital that doesn't like natural birth, right? So I have a birth preference.
Go to the hospital, or you wouldn't say I'm going to have a home birth but I'm going to have a C-section at home.
Right. Yeah. And like why I don't understand. I had this home birth, but my midwife, she didn't offer me any drugs. I don't understand.
How come she didn't come over and give me a C-section? I really wanted to have a C-section. Why didn't she do that?
Right.
Like,
you don't do that. So I have a birth preference sheet. It's really extensive that I go over with all of my clients. It has every option on there that you can imagine. Like when I looked at it the first time, I was like, what the heck? Like people do that? But there's lots of things that different cultures and different people do during birth and different things that, I had never heard of. But that's beside the point. So I go through this whole birth preference sheet with my clients, right? It's very often that we go through these options. I'll have a client, she'll go through all these options and she's like, oh yeah, I want to have this, everything pretty hands off and this dimmed lighting and all these things. She checks all these things and she's like, yeah, I really just want to keep things as natural as possible. And she's creating a picture like this bottom image, right? That's just what the picture is like. Oh, this serene, hands off home birth type situation, right? But she isn't comfortable with the home birth. She wants to go to a hospital, which is fine. And you can have a beautiful natural birth at a hospital. That's not what this slide is trying to show you.
No.
But the point is that there's a big menu available with birth, and each woman has her own preference. You have to go to the right restaurant, and you need the right cook. Okay. You need the right cook. You can't expect a totally hands-off home birth environment in a hospital. You can't. It's not the same. And so what you need to remember is that your provider that you choose is kind of like your cook. So your number one mistake is choosing the wrong cook. Okay. You can't skip the step of carefully choosing your care team. This should be where you put most of your energy in the beginning of your pregnancy.
Yeah. These are people you're hiring. So you realize that, some of them are on insurance, but you are paying for that insurance and you are paying for this. So don't feel roped into these people.
Right. You are choosing.
You choose
who to serve you. This is no different. It actually is different. It's far more important than choosing the lady that's going to cut your hair.
Yeah.
I mean, how much
serious do we agonize over getting our hair done?
Over who's cutting your hair?
Who's going to cut it? Are they going to dye it? Who's a good dye? I mean, how many times do you see in moms groups or in local community groups, who's a good hairstylist? I want this hairstyle. Who's good with long hair? Who's good with this? Who's good with that? And
who's good with these
a lot of time doing that. But then when we choose our care team, we're just like,
who does my insurance take?
Yeah.
And you just pick one off the list. And
yeah. The top one on the list. I mean, it starts with an A on the last name. It's at the top of the list and they look like they're close.
Right. They're close to me.
And then you feel roped into them when you get there, whether you like them or not. You're like, well, whatever, that's who I went with. So now I'm stuck.
Exactly. And then you might ask like your friends, like, oh, who did you have when you had your baby? Oh, I had Dr. So-and-so. They were so great. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go with them. And she is so nice. She is so nice. I just really like her. But you know what? My friend really loves going into the hospital at the first sign of a contraction and getting her epidural as soon as possible. I don't want a birth like that.
And push the Pitocin right away, because let's get this baby out of there. It's 39 in 3 days. Time to schedule my induction.
Right.
And I have a friend like that. And she's, we're really good friends. And she loves to do that. She goes in, she schedules her day, she gets hooked up, she gets on her epidural, and she's like, she loves it. It's her thing. It works. I mean, she's lucky. It works really well for her. It goes for her. And she's had 4 kids that way.
Right. I have friends like that too. And it's fine.
Well, 3 kids, I guess. She had 3 kids that way. And 2 of them, one of them, she had the epidural, but we were in Germany and they don't do epidurals. So they're really bad at them. And it didn't go through. And it was the worst birth of her entire life. Her forced natural birth.
Because she didn't want that.
No, she didn't want it. She wasn't prepared for it. She had selected, talked about how she wanted, but she wasn't careful enough to make sure that her birth was going to be respected. In Germany, they do more natural births than they do epidural births. And she really should have looked into this.
That's the same thing on the other end of the spectrum, right?
Yes.
She didn't want a natural birth. And in Germany, their paradigm about birth is different. So they see it as natural. We just do this. This is what we do most of the time. Mm-hmm. It's a very American thing to have this much medical management of birth. But some women want it. Some women want that restaurant. They want the burger or the Italian food, whichever you want to say is which. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So you just have to match it up. So let's talk about the different providers you can choose, because yes, having a provider that you match up with their personality is important. That's important. You need to like who you're seeing. Then you have a good bedside manner. You need to feel listened to. That's important. Yeah. Those are all important things. But you have to pick a provider that...
Yes. The number one thing is pick the provider.
Yes. Pick the provider.
And then everybody else.
And then everybody else. And and you need to have a provider that is really truly supportive of the type of birth and the decisions that you're going to make. And you have to remember, providers are people. Doctors and midwives are just people. They all have their own worldview. They all have their own set of experiences that has shaped their opinions about birth and everything else.
And their own preferences is how they like to do stuff.
Yep. So, and again, it's not that they're bad, that one way is better than another, but I mean, even among midwives, even among home birth midwives, as a doula, I've been surprised to see how much difference there is among out of hospital midwives. Some of them, like some of the birth centers that I've gone to for my clients they're like super nice, you know, but they're more clinical looking. They have more of the machines and the beeping and that kind of thing.
Even home birth midwives and stuff. Like I've had multiple midwives because we move a lot as military, and even home birth midwives are different. Like I had one home birth midwife, very, very medically minded. She was very medically minded, which is way different than others. I mean, she had a stirrups table and everything in her office.
Yeah. And that's just some people. Yeah. That suits a lot of women who are kind of middle of the road as far as like, I don't really want to go to the hospital because I'm worried about the management, but I still want to feel like I have a provider that knows really what she's doing medically, which midwives should know what they're doing medically, by the way. Every midwife.
All of them
should know, but there's a lot of them that like, it's not as clear because they keep everything very
they sit in the corner and aren't going to be there, like try and look like a fly on the wall in this. And
or there's their office, like their office where they see their clients, the client sits on like a nice, like, what are those things called? It's not a couch, it's like a lounge chair. What are those? No, not a futon, it's a fancy name. It's like a couch chair.
Yeah, that French word.
Yes.
The French.
And that's where she'll even
where the fancy lady lays down.
Yep,
like
that. It's just very like, they would never have the medical table because they're going for the feel of like, no, this is a homey environment. And then you have the ones that are more, like I said, like the stirrups table on the clinical, and it's not that one's better than the other. It just really depends on what you want, what you're looking for, right? So there's a few different kind of providers that you can choose. And so I kind of want to share with you the differences because a lot of people get really confused. There's a lot of different letters that we see. Okay, so you have obviously your OBGYN, the obstetrician. So this is a medical doctor who specializes in women's health and pregnancy. So they're trained in surgery.
They're surgeons.
So if you need a cesarean, it's going to be an OB that does it.
Always be an OB.
It will always be an OB because that's the type of specialist that does surgery, does C-sections. Okay. So, and they do all kinds of different women's health type surgeries and stuff. So, they're obviously going to take a more medical approach to birth because that's usually their,
specialty.
That's their specialty. Okay.
So that's their specialty. They're surgeons and they're good at it. And they specialize in the function of your reproductive organs.
Right. And that's not to say that no obstetrician is good support for natural birth, because that's not true. I've seen some great ones. I've seen some really, really amazing obstetricians that are super supportive of natural birth. Some that are even supporters of home birth. Usually they're not, but some of them are. So they are going to be the most likely to take a medical approach to birth though. So this is where if you want a natural birth and you're going to go to an OB, maybe you're high risk and you need to go to an OB or whatever. These are the questions that you're going to want to see, like find out who do you know that's had a natural birth with this provider and what was their experience like? How many
shop around,
what a percentage of their births have been natural? How do they feel about certain things? And we'll talk about some of the questions that you can ask in just a second, but that's an OBGYN. Then you have a CNM, a certified nurse midwife. So these midwives are trained in both midwifery and nursing. So they most often practice in hospitals, but they're able to practice out of hospital birth as well in some places. Like I know here, there are no certified nurse midwives that practice outside of the hospital because they wouldn't have their, well, maybe there are, but I don't know of any, because they would lose their hospital privileges because of the hospital policy. The hospital policy says, well, if you're going to work for this hospital and you're going to have hospital privileges here, you can't perform out of hospital birth. But some places they can.
Yeah.
Was your midwife in Florida a CNM?
Yeah, she was a CNM. A lot of times CNMs, if they are doing home birth, that is all they do because of the hospital privileges thing, which has to do with medical liability insurance.
Right.
Type stuff. Like their liability insurance is what makes it so they can't work outside of the hospital doing other stuff. But you can find them, and they're becoming more and more common in if you're in Colorado. I know there's a clinic in Colorado that's ran by CNMs.
Yeah, they're around. They're
like
around, and
a lot of them do birth, or they do birth center births, not just hospital, not necessarily hospital births, but like there are a lot of CNMs who've started their own birth centers and things like that. So they're getting more and more common.
They are. And so a CNM, they get their RN first. So they're a nurse first, they get their nursing certification, they get their degree in that, and then they it's like a postgraduate thing. So then they go specialize in midwifery after that.
Yeah, are they labor and delivery nurses also first for their RNs?
I don't know if they have to be a labor and delivery nurse. That's a good question. I know they're RNs first. So it's kind of like,
and they're different than a labor and delivery nurse RN, because the certified nurse midwife has to go to additional training on top of all of it in order
a labor and delivery nurse is, they're definitely not a CNM, because a CNM they have to go through a couple more years of training in midwifery. So they have all the medical background of a nurse, and then they have the midwife too. So a certified midwife is similar to a certified nurse midwife, but without the nursing. So they don't have to become a nurse. They don't have to become a registered nurse first, but they do have postgraduate master's level education in midwifery. So they have to conform to the same standards. So these are less popular. They're only recognized in a few states, but obviously they have. Tell him I'm working.
They are very well educated.
Yeah, they're very well educated.
They're supposed to be on their a lot of times, I mean, you don't see them that much. You see CPMs, the certified professional midwives, more often because they're a nationally credentialed person as opposed to individually in the different states. And you have to look at the state requirements also for CMs, because it changes, it varies from state to state.
Right. Yeah. I don't even know if we have.
They're required to do. Some states don't have very high requirements beyond the level education in midwifery. They just require not quite as many hours, but I know CPMs are required to do thousands of hours before they can be credentialed.
Yeah, CPMs is a pretty, it's pretty rigorous to go through I think it's called the NARM that they have to do. But so they're nationally credentialed, they're trained in, and they're all trained in out of hospital birth. So certified professional midwives, CPMs, and certified midwives are both considered direct entry midwives. That's where I started to get confused when I was first learning about this. So a direct entry midwife may be either a CM or a CPM. And then any out of hospital midwife may or may not be licensed by her state. They may or may not be. And here's the thing to know about licensure by the state is just because a midwife isn't licensed by the state, and like Crystal said, each state has different requirements, it doesn't mean that she's not competent midwife. So the midwife, my midwife that has delivered half of my kids, for example, she's she probably is the most well-known and well-respected out of hospital midwife in our state, and probably surrounding states
in the West.
Yeah. I mean, people come from states away to see her. She is amazing. She's got, I don't know how many years of 50,
She's
50
had
or
OB
years.
coach them through births, through natural births, like because they couldn't handle breech births. And so
Yeah.
OBs have like come to her for training and stuff. So she's like a big deal in Utah.
She's a big deal. So she knows what she's doing. She's seen it all. She's amazing. She has chosen not to get licensed. And the reason is because once she's licensed, the state then puts restrictions on her for what types of births she is legally allowed to do. So if she were to get licensed, she couldn't do twins and she couldn't do breech babies.
Mm-hmm.
So she is one of the only providers around here that is competent enough to do breech delivery. So if any of the other midwives in the area have a client that has twins or breech, they will then transfer their client to her. And if their clients still want to do an out of hospital birth and they can't get the baby to flip and all that. So if she did that, she feels really strongly about women having their birthing options, birthing rights. And if she were to do that, then it would make it so these women, when they had twins or breech, wouldn't have options. They'd have to go to the hospital, and then they'd be more likely to have cesareans. And I mean, you can look into out of hospital birth safety, if you're considering it, you should be comfortable with it before you do it. But I mean, there's lots of studies that, that show that out of hospital birth for low risk women with a competent midwife is at least as safe as in hospital birth. So it just kind of depends on what it is that you want. So
one
you need
thing
to look
with the out of hospital birth is you just need to make sure and verify that everybody on your out of hospital, like the hospital is going to be verifying backgrounds and certifications of people before they're in there. You are just putting the duty and responsibility of just making sure that they're on all the lists of where they got accredited, or where they got their time in and all that, just so you can verify those on the lists. And you do need to do that. You need to make sure that you're not going with somebody who's, I have seen like some doulas who have been like, I've been to so many births, and then they just call themselves a midwife. You just need to make sure they're on the list.
There are doulas who've done that. And then they just try and like ease into the midwife role, which as a doula, I will tell you, we do know quite a bit about birth.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of knowledge about birth. I'm not saying that, but I am not a medical provider. And I would not, quite frankly, want the responsibility of a midwife. And if I were ever to go down that road of being a midwife, like I would definitely need a lot of education. Like it's not, oh, I've seen a lot of births. Like, it's no joke. So, and we do have some of those in Utah who are like, I don't know that you're ready. Like,
they're starting
to be a midwife.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. I've heard of quite a few of them on some pages, throughout the states, and so just make sure.
And they give out of hospital midwives a bad name.
They do. And it's unfortunate because there are so many really good ones. You just need to make sure that they are saying they have the credentials that they have, and just look them up on those lists. There are lists for the nationally, the NARM and stuff. Like just look them up. My midwife even had a whole bunch of links to all of those, to those state websites and all of the national, like the websites. And she's like, you must check every one of the registries and make sure everybody's on there. Here they are, find my name. Like, because she's that serious about making sure you check and make sure that you've got the competent provider, basically. And you don't have to do it with an OB just because the hospital is liable, so they've already checked it.
Right. So we'll give you some tips on like choosing your provider and how to find out if they're on the same page in just a second. But here's kind of a summary of the key people of your team.
Mm-hmm. So you're responsible for. These are the people you're responsible for.
To find. Yes. So you have your care provider. We just talked about that. Then you have your doula, if you have one. You should have a doula because having a doula makes it a lot more likely to have a natural birth and a lot more likely to have overall just a good experience that you feel good about, because a doula can be your advocate for you. If you don't have a doula, then you got to have somebody who's there to support you. So then your partner or family members, your sister, your mom, your husband, whatever. And here's important to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Okay. Make sure it's important, especially if you're going to have a natural birth, because you need the support around you. So don't have your mom there if she's terrified of natural birth and doesn't agree with it at all, because she's not. And I know you may really want your mom there. I know this from firsthand. Like I had, with my fifth baby, I had really felt bad if I didn't have my mom and my other sister there. And there was some awkward tension between the two of them, and it affected my birth experience. And with our mom, Crystal and I both experienced this. She has a really hard time seeing us in pain. And so it becomes not the most supportive energy, I guess is the best way to say it. Because
well, and we're both empaths, so we pick up really well on the emotions of those around us and try and keep everything in harmony. So we feel bad as she's feeling bad, then we're feeling bad.
Yeah. So recognize everybody's weaknesses too. So if your husband, for example, doesn't have the capacity to be a big part of the birth process because he gets freaked out or whatever.
Or he's just not that lovey-dovey person who's going to come over and like hold your hand and rub your back and do all these things. If he's going to, play his game, be like, is it time for you to have the baby yet?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just recognize that. Like, don't expect somebody to be like all of a sudden a different person than they are there. Right.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have other support. Make sure that you're covered all around. Right. I have clients where their husbands are awesome, but they just have a really hard time with getting super nervous or whatever. And so having me there helps to calm the environment. And then that mom has the support that she needs where her husband wouldn't be able to give it. And to
help the husbands get focused on where they need to be.
Right.
As well.
So make sure that you are surrounding yourself with a really good care team. I know a lot of ladies are like, I'm just kind of embarrassed to have anybody at my birth, so it's just going to be me and my husband or whatever. But like,
then in that case, you really should get a doula. Somebody who sees birth all the time and is comfortable with it and is going to be there and be what you need, whether it's like in the background helping you out or like as your emotional support. Yeah. Because she can do either of those. And I'm letting you know your care provider is not there for that.
Your care provider comes at the end, just so you know.
Some people think that's what their care provider is going to do. And I've seen a lot of women when they choose a home birth or something, and they're like, but my midwife wasn't like right there. I wanted her to be so motherly to me. And you can choose a midwife like that. But if you're somebody who really likes that, then you need to find a doula who's going to do that for you too, because also a midwife can't always be right in the middle of it because she does have to watch how you're progressing and watch lots of other things. So she can't always be mothering.
Yeah, and she has to
be a motherling person.
Yep. She has to enter notes. And sometimes like at a birth center, you might not be the only one in labor. Like, there's a lot. I've been to a few birth center births where the midwives are amazing, but they are taking care of more than one client at a time.
Mm-hmm. So you just really need to be aware of these things and plan for them. And a lot of things that ruin your birth are going to be your expectations. So you need to make sure your expectations are realistic and plan for them and put the people in those positions that will be able to do that support for you. So if you need somebody who's lovey-dovey, you're not sure your husband's going to be able to handle it. If this is your first baby, and they're already a little freaked out with stuff, then you're going to probably need somebody there who's like your mom, if she's very loving and can handle it and is like, yeah, here, let me cheer for you. But you just need to really consider these people and don't feel bad not having people come to your births. Like, they can really slow it up.
Yeah, just don't. Yeah, I experienced that with that fifth baby. It was not the best experience to allow my feeling like, oh, I really want them to feel like I care about them and I'm super close and I want them to see what a natural birth is like and and it didn't serve my labor well.
No, that was probably like, unfortunately, it took like something that could have been really beautiful and it was Steph really felt like she needed to have a redemption birth after that.
I did. And it was, thankfully.
Yes.
Thankfully, number 6 was number 5 wasn't a terrible birth experience, like by most standards. But for me, it was like,
but for you, it wasn't
great.
I mean, in your Steph's very good about setting her birth space up how she wants it and how she likes it. And then it was like, it was just too much. It just ended up being too much. It was a good experience, but it was
too much. Yeah.
having too
And
much.
it slowed things down and everything else. So you got to be careful with who you have at your birth. So let's talk about some questions to find out if your provider is on the right page as you. So basically, you can take
any provider you choose.
any provider. You can take a screenshot of this. There's lots of questions you can ask, but the basic thing is ask open-ended questions. So I don't know what is, let's see, how many weeks overdue could I go before transferring to a doctor or push to an induction? That's a good question. And you can basically, you know, how do you handle it when your clients go past 40 weeks? How comfortable are you with post dates? What are some of the reasons that you would encourage an induction?
Open-ended questions, not necessarily yes, no.
Yeah, like, are you okay with natural birth? The answer is
Yes,
going to
of
be
course
yes
I am.
all the time. Of course I am.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's going to be yes until you get to the hospital.
Yeah. Under what circumstances would you do an episiotomy?
Yeah. How often do you do episiotomies when you're dealing with a woman who wants to have a natural birth?
Yep. How often do you have, how many client, like what percentage of your patients would you say have it, like want a natural birth? And how many of those actually have one? That would be a good question. Things like that. So ask open-ended questions to get an idea of where they're at, if they're on the same page. Ask your doula if you have a doula or you have a network of doulas. And how hands-on they are. Yeah. Ask your doula because she'll know what kind of birth you want and like what the providers in the area, even if she hasn't worked with them. Like, we hear things, we have a connection, we have a network of people, so we can we get an idea of what types of ways the different providers in the area practice.
Well, and with all OBs also asking them, like, are they the ones who are typically at the birth? If you go into labor after hours, will they be the one there, or is it going to be somebody on staff at the hospital? Like,
right. So whether you're going to give birth in a hospital or out of hospital, you also should find out which hospital is most friendly to natural birth. Different hospitals have different protocols. So, I mean, I know which hospitals around here are going to be most friendly to natural birthers. And you can also check with the hospital with like natural birth friendly nurses. So if you go tour the hospital, like, you can say, do you usually have a nurse on staff who's really good with natural birth? Because some of them are more supportive than others. Some of them kind of have like, oh yeah, Susie's are really great with our natural birthers. We always assign Susie to our natural birthers because she's really great. And some of them are so good. Like, some of the nurses do doula type stuff. I've learned doula tricks from nurses before. And some of them don't give a crap. Some of them are just like, they just come in, they just record the numbers. Some of them are annoyed with natural birthers. Some hospital providers
so rude.
Don't like them.
You got to watch out, and you got to find out. The hospitals and the nurses do this for sure. When I went in for my first one, it was a hospital birth, and the lady walks in and she's like, "Okay, let's get you hooked up to your IV." And I was like, "Well, I already put in my birth plan. I didn't want an IV and all this." And I was like, "I'm going for a natural birth." And she's like, "Do you really think you're going to be able to do that?" I mean, the nurse comes in, and I mean, I was just blown away. So, and there are some nurses that are really good. And I mean that, but I went to a hospital that was obviously not very friendly, and I should have called around and asked and made these inquiries, because like by the time I was done, my whole birth plan was blown out of the water. The only thing that happened is I didn't get Pitocin or an epidural. Those are the only things that
right. And see, this is a good point. This is a good thing to point out.
Like, it was terrible. So,
and just mind you, she did have a natural birth. She wanted a natural birth. She got a natural birth, and her experience sucked. So
yeah,
it really is about how you feel about it, not how it ends up.
Yes, it is. If I had had anybody who treated me other than like an animal in a cage at the veterinarian that they were going to take care of and do whatever they wanted to, it would have been different. But I wasn't. Like, my concerns weren't addressed. It was very difficult. And I even had my mom and Steph was my doula, and she was even advocating for me. Well, she was, were you just getting certified? I think I was one of your certifying births. But
you were.
But both her and my mom had pulled the nurses aside and talked to them, and they still just did whatever they wanted. And it was because I chose I thought I had chosen a good provider, but I ended up at a terrible.
He didn't end up actually being great though. He totally violated you.
He totally
So
violated
he
me.
seemed like a good provider because
Mhm.
he was also my provider that I ended up leaving.
And I had said when I was at the office, how do you feel about natural birth? Are you good with natural birth? Oh yeah, of course I'm good with natural birth. So really ask and dig these questions. And I should have asked more questions, ask the questions that, how are they going to be for you? Like what kind of care they provide as far as being hands-on, hands-off, how often, like how long do they let you push before they're going to try and push an episiotomy? And really vet the facility as well.
Yeah.
Like
And
vet,
really like also because I
even
don't
at
know that we could have known that provider wasn't, because I had him with my second baby and he was great.
yeah.
But I
But
also
you
think,
delivered at a different hospital.
yes, I did deliver at a different hospital. And I think what do you need?
Yeah. So you're gonna want
I
to.
also think that like just being able to advocate for yourself in the hospital.
Yes. Yes.
And then
so
what was I gonna say? Ask people in Facebook groups. That's a great way.
yes.
Ask people in Facebook groups. And then also like if you're gonna choose an out of hospital provider, find out what kind of relationship they have with the local hospital and their care providers. So like,
and what they do if there is a transfer and how it goes and how which facility you should be planning on going to.
Yeah, because a lot of out of hospital midwives will have a specific backup OB that they work for, and that does help. Not all of them have that, and that helps. So my midwife here has the same backup that she uses that respects her, and he is well respected in the hospital system. He's been an OB for a really long time, so he's well respected. So if she has a problem and needs to transfer a patient, then a lot of times he'll come in and he will take her patient over. Whereas it's not like you just get transferred and you might get some jerk doctor who thinks you're a complete idiot for giving birth outside the hospital.
Oh man, and then they'll treat you and your baby bad. And then you're at risk. And then you're at risk for something going wrong because you're at a terrible hospital and they don't treat you the same. Some places treat you like a second-class citizen. At a place in Florida when we were there was one hospital that was definitely friendly and caring to those who came in, but there was another hospital that if you were transferred from a home birth, they would leave you in the waiting room. So if you needed and you're transferring for an emergency, you need to be looked at. You can't be sitting in the waiting room for 2 hours with your baby's arm hanging out. So you really just need to be careful about choosing your facilities and looking into and asking your midwife, where should I transfer and where are you willing to go? Because some midwives won't even transfer to some hospitals. Like they have a hospital they'll transfer to and they're like, you need to be able to transfer to this hospital because that's where I have a very good working relationship with the staff. This other hospital is not so friendly toward it. So you're going to have to be prepared to go towards this other hospital. So, and a lot of midwives now are having really good relationships with the hospitals.
Yeah, they do. They're collaborating better and better the more time that goes by. We're not saying this to freak you out. Like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to have a home birth because I'm going to get left untreated at a hospital. They're not all like that. And a good midwife will have experience because midwives do have to transfer. Like they do have a transfer rate. So, maybe 2%, maybe 5% of their patients, of their clients do transfer. So they deal with it, enough to know that they have a good midwife will have it figured out. Oh yeah, we always transfer to such and such hospital. This is what happens. We have this process that we follow. They treat us great. Like, so
yeah, we have a whole plan set out. My midwife in Colorado had that with the hospital she transferred to. They had quarterly meetings between all the OBs and all the local home birth midwives quarterly, like to just make sure their number one priority at that hospital in that department was that there was this cohesion between making sure that the home birth community is respected and taken care of when they come into the hospital, because the number one priority is the mom and the baby.
Right.
And that is important. And you want that philosophy regardless of what birth you're having.
Exactly.
So provider.
just ask those questions. And then we've already talked, I feel like, a lot about this, about finding a good out of hospital midwife. Again, asking for recommendations. Local natural living groups like your natural mommies groups on Facebook, those are great places to start your search of finding a good out of hospital midwives. Like Crystal said, do your credential check, ensure that you check out their credentials, make sure that they have, like I said, it's not a huge red flag if a midwife isn't licensed, but she should have midwifery certification.
Yeah, check
And
out the midwifery certification. If
and
you
interview
really
them
want the licensing, do
and
the license.
ask them all the questions you want. You guys,
Mhm.
home birth midwives are so used to all the questions. Like, what do you do in emergency? What do you do
Yes.
if my baby comes out not breathing? What do you do if my labor stalls? What do you do if the cord's wrapped around the neck? All those things, they can answer those questions for you. You should, you know, be able to talk to them about any concern that you have, interview them, see how you like them, see if you like their bedside manner, see if you like if that chase lounge, that's what that's called.
Yeah, the
If
Chase
that
Lounge.
chase lounge isn't your style and you prefer a more clinical setting, you can see that when you go interview them, see where their birth center is, where their office is, how they practice, what they do, all those
Mhm.
things.
And if you find later that you chose somebody and something's like stuff's coming up that you don't like, go interview another one and find another provider. It's okay at 36 weeks.
Yes,
to
here's the
switch
last thing.
providers.
It's never too late to change providers. I know women that have changed providers at 39 weeks. And oftentimes that's when you start to see, like, oh, wait a minute, I thought they were really supportive of natural birth, and now they're giving me all the reasons under the sun why I need to induce at 39 weeks, 6 days. Like,
Yes.
maybe they're going on vacation.
It's right next to Christmas. Why is he pushing me to have a C-section today or an induction for like 39 weeks exactly? Oh, that's right, because the holiday's coming.
Yeah. So, sometimes you just don't realize until the end when they've said all this time, oh, yeah, I'm so supportive of that. And then you get this bait and switch. This happens a lot with especially women who are going for a VBAC. So, yeah, you just got to realize you're in control, realize you're the one hiring. And I know with insurance, sometimes it gets tricky, but usually insurance covers more than one person. You can find somebody in your network who supports you. And listen, I know so many women who they are not wealthy women by any stretch, and it has mattered for them enough to have like their home birth with the midwife they want, that they've come up with the money out of pocket to pay for them when they're not covered by insurance. It really, like, you can do it. Just pick the provider that you want.
And it is cheaper than a copay a lot of times at the hospital.
Yes, an out of hospital is cheaper than a copay a lot of times.
It's cheaper than a copay. And I know my midwives, every one of them ended up doing births on trade too. So like my midwife gets all her lawn care done. Another one has her house cleaned all the time, like because she's accepted trades with these women who couldn't either pay for it or they couldn't pay all of it, so they created a trade. And so she's always got her lawn care taken care of, she's got car stuff taken care of, she's gotten her house cleaned, like all these things.
Yeah,
because
our midwife had her flooring redone in her house by one of their clients' husbands. And yeah, there's a lot. Midwives are used to working out.
Steph's even done a trade for lawyer work, like to get a will done. Like,
yeah, my last client, her dad's a lawyer, and he did a trust in return for doula services for his daughter. So,
so you can like be creative. Like, these are just people, and they are willing to.
Not only are they people, most home birth midwives
and doulas
do it because they are freaking passionate about helping women have the type of birth that they want. They are so passionate about it. They aren't doing it for the money. Midwives are not rich.
No, they are not rich. They aren't rich, and they're and neither are doulas. And I know a lot of people look at the price tag and they're like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. But like for a midwife, that's tons of appointments. They have to put the whole entire month on pause for a birth because there's 5 weeks that a person can have a baby in, between 37 and 42 weeks, and sometimes longer or shorter. And they have to be on call that whole time, so they can't go anywhere.
Yeah, well, and then they always have regular clients, so it's pretty much all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's,
So
you got to realize that this is the price, and doula's the same. They have to be on call for such a long time, and then they can be at your birth constantly the whole entire time. So the price on it is not unfair.
right.
And there are ways, and most doulas and most midwives are willing to make some kind of exchange as well.
They are.
So
Well,
if you've got a skill, family member has a skill,
yeah.
most of us can clean.
Yep. Well, you guys, that's it for class 1. I have to hop off because I have a prenatal appointment I need to go to with a doula client, and that's all of it for class 1. So I hope you guys like have started thinking like, oh, okay, maybe I've really made a great decision with my provider. I've nailed it. Or maybe you're like, oh, maybe I need to ask some questions.
Ask some questions. Don't hesitate to change providers.
Yes. And so thanks again. So proud of you for taking the time to be here. So proud of you. Seriously, you guys are amazing to take the time to do this. It will serve you well. And we are so excited to see you in class 2.
Yes.
So,
it was great to see you. Thanks for getting in the driver's seat of your own birth, and we'll talk to you next time.
take care.